Welcome back to this WISN 12 News special, Bridging the Gap, a conversation about race and police relations.
Milwaukee Police Chief Ed Flynn is in Washington, D.C., taking part in a town hall with President Obama. Here's more of our conversation today. Back in Milwaukee, the Dontre Hamilton case. It's resolved in the courts. It's unresolved by many people. Where do you think our city stands on finding some common ground?
Listen, I think the vast majority of people in Milwaukee understand what the facts of the event were. A police officer went to the scene where an individual was behaving in a somewhat bizarre but non-threatening manner. He intervened. Because he used the wrong approach tactics, that mentally ill person ended up disarming the police officer of his baton and assaulting him with it. The officer used deadly force to protect himself. Within the framework of criminal culpability, he has been exonerated by the District Attorney's Office and by the United States Attorney's Office. His act was not criminal, but the Milwaukee Police Department held him accountable because his acts were outside the bounds of his training on that particular incident. And because the degree of harm was a death, he was fired for that. Now that's the appropriate accountability, and I know there will undoubtedly be civil actions as well to further underscore that accountability. I think most people in Milwaukee get it. But there are people in this community for whom the issue will never be resolved. Certainly the family grieves the loss of their relative and will never feel it's appropriately resolved. But the criminal justice process acted appropriately in this particular case. But the police disciplinary accountability process also worked, as I would assume the civil process will. So I think most Milwaukeeans get it, but for some, for understandable reasons, for some it will never be resolved.
Do you think both races in Milwaukee get it then?
Well, you've covered the demonstrations.
This is about police and race relations.
Well, it's about police and race relations, but when that happened in April of 2014, it was overwhelmingly an issue about mental health. There was no talk of racism in that incident until after Ferguson happened in August. Then it was weaved into the national narrative. Until that event occurred, it was about untreated mentally ill people who have no access to medication, who have no facilities to properly treat them on the streets of our city. I think if you get to the neighborhood level, the neighborhoods get what their concerns and problems are. Yes, they were certainly disturbed by the Dontre Hamilton incident. But our experience at the neighborhood level with the people who are summoning us and working with us to reduce crime in their neighborhoods indicate they understand the distinction between a racist act and a mental health-based tragedy that resulted in a death.
Chief, I want to take you back to the recent events in Dallas, and we saw an outpouring of support for police after the Dallas shootings under the whole Blue Lives Matter banner. I wonder what you think of the Blue Lives Matter movement, and by that I mean by differentiating which lives matter, does that really serve the ultimate purpose of unity?
I understand where the Blue Lives Matter movement comes from, and I think it comes from a place of goodwill. My concern, obviously, is yes, we're drawing distinctions about whose lives matter. My understanding of where the Black Lives Matter emanated from was simply the fact that African Americans are overrepresented as victims of police violence. Now, I would offer they're overrepresented at an even higher rate as victims of violence generally. But the fact of the matter is that became a rallying cry to draw attention to the perceived shortcomings of the criminal justice system generally and the police in particular. Now, obviously, against a backdrop of that, implicitly, of course, all lives matter. But let's not get into an argument about whose life matters when. There are two parallel discussions occurring right now, and it's very frustrating to me to try to entertain them both. The one discussion is the levels of violence in poor communities of color, particularly poor communities inhabited by African Americans, are grotesquely high. It's a plague. All right? If you're an African American in this country, you're more than 4 times more likely to be murdered than any other group. In Milwaukee, for the last 10 years, 80% of our homicide victims are African American. No other group comes close in this city. 85% of our people that are shot and wounded every year are African American. That's devastating a generation, devastating economic opportunity, and making the streets of those neighborhoods almost uninhabitable after dark. That's wrong. And the people that live there want us to do something about it, and we do our best to do it. And it's in that context that we're seizing more than 2,000 firearms a year, which is every bit as many proportionally as Chicago is, from the streets of our city. Now, that's one conversation we have every day. And then there's a separate conversation, as though it has nothing to do with those sad facts, about police use of deadly force. And that any use of deadly force anywhere in America is used to tar and feather American policing everywhere. That every police officer in America has to answer for an apparent improper use of force by an American police officer anywhere else. That's wrong. We can't have those two separate conversations. If we're going to understand what the police do, we have to understand the context in which we do it. We, the police, have a duty to honor the fears of the African American community, grounded in unfortunate and tragic history that creates a circumstance where the people that need us the most have historic reasons to distrust us. That's the basic conundrum of American policing, is bridging that gap between the people that need us, also sometimes fear us. And we need help to do that. And it does no good to have a separate conversation about police behavior disconnected from what disadvantaged communities want of their police. We've got to have those conversations at the same time. I'm hoping tonight maybe we can begin to inch towards that so that we can understand that the police and the community are in this together, both in terms of police accountability and trying to reduce the unacceptable levels of violence in disadvantaged neighborhoods.
You can watch our entire interview with Chief Flynn online at WISN.com and on the 12 News app. It's nearly a half hour long and includes his answer on why police might start making arrests if protests spill onto the streets.